Hello, it's Dana and
Joshua.
thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. We're happy that you're here. Today we have a slightly different video. This is something we talk about every single day, is how are we managing our finances. Today we actually want to talk about our personal experience, and now that FIRE is very popular and we've taken a lot of information from a lot of different sources out there, I've designed something that we finally think is working.
This is not investing advice. Do not consider this as professional investing advice. If you need professional investing advice, get a financial advisor. These are just general tips as far as how to invest.
This is our experience
Yes.
investing. So we're not giving any advice whatsoever. We're providing you what we have experienced as investors that have started to take their investing very seriously very recently. It's a learning curve to all of this, and hopefully through this process we're able to share these mistakes that we've made. And we're, both logic-based people. I would say we're both very math-oriented, and we're making these mistakes too.
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure that we're sharing, and being transparent with you about how we've made those mistakes, and now we've learned from them, and hopefully we can share that information with you. So we want to share our top 5 mistakes that we have made personally while investing. We talk about everything before we make any type of decision, but Joshua has been extremely hands-on in making sure that the actual actions take place. So I'm going to let him talk a little bit about those top 5 mistakes that we've made while investing.
Tip number 1, or mistake to avoid number 1, is don't wait for the market to be at the perfect position. Go ahead and start investing now. The more time that you have in the market, the better off you're going to be. The market goes up, the market goes down. Even the best people on Wall Street can't exactly predict when the bottom is, when the top is, and so forth. It's a good idea to just go ahead and start getting your money in as soon as possible. Once you have those basic savings ready, start investing as much as you can.
The whole thing is that the market is constantly going up over time.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you get in at a market high or something like that, it's going to get higher over time. So why not get in now?
That's right. Tip number 2, avoid the shiny object. In other words, there's always going to be people that are coming to you on the internet saying, hey, this is the new hot company to invest in. For example, I got dragged into the meme stocks, like with GameStop and AMC. And the problem with this is that these are not reliable investments. Yes, you can make a lot of money, but you can also lose your money, and you can also just simply lose time by not having the consistent growth of having companies and index funds that are established, that have a long history of growth, that are going to do well, that aren't a flash in the pan type of thing. And sometimes there are even pump and dump schemes that you have to be aware of. So in other words, avoid the shiny object. This also goes hand in hand with avoid the fear of missing out. It's better to be in a stock that is well established, that even like companies that you've heard of are oftentimes better than a company that you've never heard of or that is in some other part of the world. Pump and dump scheme is basically when someone with a big platform, usually on the internet, will tell people, hey, invest in this specific stock. And then once the people listening to them, they invest in it, the price goes up. Then the person that's actually giving the advice, they sell off their stock at a high price, which lowers the price for everybody else. The person that's giving the speech, telling people to buy into the specific stock, they make out like a bandit. And yeah, it's something you want to be aware of, and something you want to avoid when you're investing.
And a lot of times, I'll just add, the people that are doing the pump and dump, they're usually doing this with stocks that don't have a well-established history.
All right, and for tip number 3, staying diversified. Don't put all your eggs into one basket. It's very common if you're into a stock and it's doing well, you want to keep putting more money into that specific stock. This is why it's a good idea to have a lot of core of your funds with index funds, because this allows you to cover like a large portion of the market. Even a really good stock, like for example, I think Apple and Microsoft are solid stock, but I wouldn't want a huge percentage of my portfolio to be in that one stock. A good rule of thumb is like 5%. If a single company is 5% or more of your portfolio, that means you're at risk of losing that 5%. If you're investing in like an index fund or a mutual fund, this doesn't apply because those are diversified across a bunch of different companies. As a general rule, it's better to invest a small amount in a lot of different companies rather than putting your whole nest egg, your whole life savings into this one company and hoping that it does really, really well.
And I wanted to add a little bit of information about diversifying, putting them in a mutual fund or ETF. What those funds do is reduces your risk by having that ETF that is usually one sector, one group of similar types of companies. So a technology ETF, for example, might have Apple, Microsoft, Google all in one ETF, but just fractions of the overall investment is risk adjusted or spread over many different companies. And so that's why it's a lot less risky to use an ETF versus putting the whole dollar amount of your money into one single company's singular stock.
Exactly. So tip number 4, and this is something I've personally been guilty of. It's a bad idea to be checking your account every single day and moving stuff around constantly. So it is a good idea to check your account regularly, probably like once a month or once every couple of months is a good time frame. But if you're checking your account every single day, that's going to cause your emotions to come into play. And the market swings up and down a lot, especially if you're in some of these growth stocks, like for example with Apple. If you're moving that around constantly, selling and buying and selling and buying different stocks, what your emotions are going to cause you to do often is you're going to end up buying at a high point when the stock is swinging up and selling at a low point when the stock is swinging down. That's actually the opposite of what you want to do. So what you want to do is you want to establish a consistent portfolio with a lot of index or mutual funds as a core of your portfolio, and then some individual companies can also be added. But then you want to make small moves. So in other words, you don't want to take your whole semi truck and swerve it to the left, swerve it to the right. You want to make little tiny adjustments that are going to allow you to optimize your portfolio for the best. And some of the biggest moves that I've made have actually cost me a lot of money in the long run because I was sweating it and getting too emotional. And just generally speaking, you want to keep your emotions out of the picture as much as possible. You want to add anything to that?
100% agree.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And it wasn't just Joshua. Before he was making these decisions, he would come to me and ask me about them. And I would go like, sure, it looks like it's going to do exactly what you said it was going to do. And I actually agree with you that literally, making lots of little changes along the way, it has hurt us, but it has also taught us a lot about how the market works. And so hopefully through that, we can share with you some of those tips too.
Yeah, and this also ties back into the other tip, which is to invest in established companies. If you're investing in a company that's well known, that has a track record of doing really well, you can look at the 10-year performance. That's a big stat that I like to look at. If the company has performed well over 10 whole years, you can feel pretty good about putting your money into it. You want to put that money into that stock and stick with it. Let it sit for not just a few weeks, but like a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's how you're going to see the best returns on your investment. And then number 5 is going to be minimize your expenses. And so the way that you're going to do this, there's 2 things basically that you can do. The first thing is when you're investing into a mutual fund or index fund, check the expense ratio. You want as low of an expense ratio as possible. For mutual funds, that usually means under 1%. And for index funds, that usually means under 0.5%. And some index funds can even be very, very low. You can even get like 0.1% or even 0% in some cases on index funds. What that's going to do is by minimizing your expenses, that's going to avoid eating into your profits over a long period of time. You may think, 1-2%. That doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but in the long run, a 2% expense ratio is going to cost you a lot of money, even compared to a 1% expense ratio. And these days it's very competitive with the big firms, so that means that the expense ratios are getting very low. So you don't have to settle for an expense ratio over 1%. You can get an expense ratio under 1%, and for index funds, even much lower than that. Even for index funds, honestly, I shoot for around 0.1%, which is going to mean very, very little of your profits are taken out. And the second thing you can do that also relates back to expenses is you want to put the high dividend stocks and funds into your retirement accounts. Because the reason is that your retirement accounts are not taxable, or if they are, they're going to be taxed later on in the future if it's for example an IRA. So that means that you're going to benefit the most from getting dividends into those funds. And for your brokerage account, and by the way, you do want to max out the retirement accounts before you go into the brokerage account, but that's a little more complicated for a different video. But for the brokerage accounts, that's where you want to put your low dividends. And this is typically like growth stocks, single company stocks, high growth index funds like the QQQ index fund, which I think is a really strong one. You want to put those into your brokerage account because the low dividends means that you're going to be paying less taxes every year. And this also relates back to tip number 4. If you're not moving your money around constantly, you're going to pay less in expenses. Because whenever you sell a stock, if you made a profit off of it, you have to pay taxes. If it's in your brokerage account, you have to pay taxes on that profit. By keeping your money in the same stocks for a long period of time, especially over 12 months or more, that means that you pay less taxes because it's considered a long-term capital gain as opposed to a short-term capital gain. So again, it's several things you can do, but the key point here is minimize your expenses. Even when it comes to choosing a brokerage account, this is why I like Fidelity personally, because for trading, you're paying $0 commission. And that's really important these days because in the old days, you would really have to pay a commission on each and every trade that you make. These days, it's so competitive. They really want your buy-in as a customer. So you're going to be able to get $0 commission from most of the major trading firms. If you're paying a commission for trading each stock, I would really recommend looking around and seeing if you can get a better deal elsewhere. And you want to stick with a broker that's really highly established, highly dependable. I'm not a big fan of the new apps that are out these days. My personal opinion is stick to the really established brokerages, like for example Fidelity, and you're going to have a better time with it. They have a really established track record. They have really good support. If you need to call them, they can help you out. But if you need professional financial advice, there's definitely services available. And the only thing I would recommend is that you make sure you're paying a commission of 1% or lower.
Just to add to the tip number 4, I know it might seem confusing. We're saying definitely try to risk adjust your investments by not investing in singular accounts. But we sort of just told you not to how to possibly do a better investment with a singular account. I just want to say we have a mixture of investments. Yeah. The vast majority of our portfolio is in ETFs and mutual funds, but we do have some of our investment money in singular company investments. So I just wanted to clarify for those of you who, are looking at how to do this. You can do this in a plethora of ways. We're just sharing what our experience is.
Yeah, it's fine to invest in a single company, but you always have to remember the worst case scenario. That single company goes bankrupt. Your single company stock can literally go to zero. So you have to be okay with saying, okay, I'm going to invest, say, $500 in this single company. I'm okay with losing this entire $500 if things go bad. And that's where the 5% rule comes in. So as long as you don't put more than 5% of your portfolio into any single company, you're typically going to be good.
All right, so now we want to give you a summary of what those 5 tips were. So Joshua, what were the 5 tips?
Yeah, just to go back over and summarize. Tip number 1, don't wait for the market to be at the bottom. Go ahead and start getting your money in now and invest consistently over a long period of time. Tip number 2, avoid the shiny object, avoid the fear of missing out. And this also applies to pump and dump schemes. Tip number 3, diversify your portfolio, and you can remember the 5% rule. Don't put any more than 5% of your portfolio into one single company. Tip number 4, don't move money around constantly and probably don't even check your account every day. Tip number 5, minimize your expenses by picking low expense ratio index funds and mutual funds, and by putting your high dividend accounts into your retirement accounts and your low dividend stocks into your brokerage account.
I hope you enjoyed our YouTube video today. I know it's a little bit different than our other YouTube videos, but this is a lifestyle channel, and honestly, a big part of our life is managing our finances. It's why we go to work every day, is to make sure that we can retire early. We both have a very, very targeted goal of retiring early, and the first thing that we wanted to share with you was the mistakes that we made early on. And we're still early in this journey, but we want to share that as we go.
I hope that was clear as mud, as we say in the tech business.
I think you did great, babe.
Thanks.
That's good. All right, so we hope that you enjoyed our YouTube video today. Please like, subscribe, comment, all the things. We're so happy that so many of you have joined us so far, and we want to continue our journey with you. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.